Now we're going to look at the American armbar, or the americana, or sometimes the wrist up armbar from the top of the mount position. Now we're going to look at the American armbar. We have several ways to do this move, but this is going to be one of the most fundamental and basic, and therefore one of the best ways to do it. Two things will happen from this top position when you start to punch. Number one, the guy will turn his back and expose his neck. Number two, he'll start to cover his face as I'm punching him. And that's how we're going to expose his arms for the American armbar. I start to punch the guy here. I continue the punch. My first key reference point is my 5 digits go right at his wrist. As I'm continuing this momentum, I drive his arm to the ground with my arm straight. My other hand will go underneath his tricep as we go to the ground. The next key reference point is my elbow is directly beside his head. My third key reference point, my other arm is now underneath his tricep, and I grab my wrist with 5 digits. My fourth key reference point is that my wrist will be straight. The fifth key reference point, my head goes on top of my hand. This will keep the guy from bending the arm in this direction. So I add leverage by putting my head down. My next key reference point is I'm looking away from him. I don't want the soft parts of my face exposed here. If the guy starts to punch me or try to eye gouge, here if he's punching, he's only going to get the hardest part of my head just for a second before you're able to compound fracture the joint. Now to finish the move, what I want to do is drag his wrist towards his hip. So I'm dragging his wrist this way down the mat. As I drag his wrist, I lift his elbow up with my forearm. So I'm in this position, 5 digits with my hand grabbing his wrist. My other arm is underneath his tricep, and I've grabbed my own wrist. My wrists are straight, my head is down. I'm dragging his wrist down the mat as I lift his elbow up to make the guy tap for this position. So again, the key to the finish, drag the wrist down the mat and lift his elbow up. What we see a lot is only the lift. People will just start to lift and crank this. Notice the weight transfer when I do this. If he hugs my back, he can roll me in this direction. I'll end up on the bottom. So it's not just dragging the arm down the mat. If I only drag and the guy's got a flexible shoulder, I'll never be able to get him to tap. It's the combination of the two, dragging and lifting in a one continuous fluid motion to make the submission effective. Now, these are common mistakes on the American armbar. And again, to emphasize, even in professional fights in 2006, we see people making these mistakes. And the importance on being technical, again, is that if you want the moves to work against a bigger, stronger, more athletic person, they have to be completely efficient. So now let's look at some of the common mistakes. One of the first mistakes is grabbing with your thumbs. Here in this position, I lose leverage with my hand. A big, strong guy can go against my thumbs, straighten his arm, and break his grip. If he twists against my thumbs, the grip's going to give. So again, a key point is 5-digit grip, grab his wrist, and get your wrist straight. I want to make a hook over his arm, so if he tries to extend his arm in this position, I have a lot of leverage. Another key mistake would be having my wrist bent. Here, I have no leverage. Even with 5 digits, if he pops his arm sideways, it's going to go out. So to correct that, make sure that your wrists are straight. Another key mistake would be keeping your head up here. The guy will be able to punch, or eye gouge or hit the soft parts of the face. So go ahead and put the head down. Some more mistakes we see with this arm is cinching the arm in this way too tight. Now think about this. If this arm is just outside of 90 degrees, if he lifts his hips in this direction, I have balance on this point of his wrist. So if I'm holding him here, my arm's beside his neck, his arm's just outside of 90 degrees. If he tries to roll me over here, I'm going to create a point of base. So I'm going to have 3 points of base. If I cinch this arm in close to his neck, which we see a lot, now I have no base in that direction. It's easier for the guy to roll me right over top of the arm. So to correct that, just make sure that your elbow's beside his head, your wrist is straight, his arm is just barely outside of 90 degrees. Here would be 90 degrees. And just a little bit outside of 9 degrees, comfortably. The next mistake would be reaching underneath his elbow. A lot of people will do this, and the move won't work. I want to stay underneath the guy's tricep, my head down, and now I'm going to have the leverage to make sure that I lift the arm. And the final mistake, and perhaps one of the most common, is not doing the drag and the lift together. It's doing one or the other, or one and then the other, rather than both at the same time. So just lifting the arm up in the air, again, I transfer my weight over here. It's easy to get reversed in that direction. Or two, just dragging the arm down the mat, I'm starting to create a lot of space and a potential for escape. What I always want to do is drag the wrist towards his hips as I lift the elbow and continue to drag to make the opponent submit.